Do you see it, Wendell? Are we up?
Not yet. We're up.
Okay, good, good. All right, well, we'll give a few minutes for some people to jump in. I don't see any viewers just yet, but if you're here, let us know. If you're not here, let us know. No, that wouldn't work. But this is N4H&H here with, I've got Bobby Graves and Wendell Neal from the Hurricane Watch Net. And as soon as we see a few viewers pop up here, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to interview Bobby and ask some questions, and then we're going to have a Q&A period later on. And okay, so yeah, here we go. Ham radio guy joined us. How you doing there? K7. So I guess you're out west. Of course, you can never tell exactly these days by the call. Okay, now we got 7 viewers showing up, and of course people will be able to watch the rerun, so we can always depend on that. But it'd be nice that we have some live viewers and they can ask questions. So I'll go ahead and get started here, and we'll hopefully some more will join us as well. And this is N4H&H. We are going to Nevada. Okay, cool. And we're going to this is National Preparedness Month. So in honor of that, you may have, some of you who are Patreon members may have seen the video that I put out about a week ago. Actually, it was an old video where I interviewed my brother, and what motivated him to get into amateur radio was that he and his wife went through 5 hurricanes in Florida, and they were thinking maybe they ought to get a ham radio after that. So, you ordered an ATAS 120. Cool, man. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm still liking that antenna now, and it's will soon be 2 years. And speaking of my brother, hey Wayne, and hey Joe, Joe and I were commenting with each other today. Hey Johnny, so. Because of my brother's experience with hurricanes in Florida, he lived down on the Gulf Coast, and they rode out 5 hurricanes. And so I interviewed him. It's been almost 3 years ago, I believe, but I think people miss it because they don't realize that I have around 60 playlists on my YouTube channel, and there's a playlist for, hey John, there is a playlist for, also from Nevada, there's a playlist for inclement weather and interviews, and so I got that interview in there, and I regurgitated it, I guess you could say, hey Chuck, and got it, put it out again to my Patreon members the last week, about a week ago, again in honor of National Hurricane Month. So couldn't wait to get this one on there, because we're gonna have Bobby Graves and Wendell Neal, and they are big wigs with the Hurricane Watch Net. And I'm going to read to you a little bit about Bobby's background. We'll probably touch on Wendell's at some point, too, because these guys are uniquely qualified to do what they do. But before this is over, what I want you to learn is that anybody can help out with the Hurricane Watch Net as long as you have at least a general class license. And, hey, David, and as long as you, even if you're a tech, you can help out with what's called Skywarn. And maybe Bobby will touch on that a little bit too, because he's got a background in Skywarn, and that is done over 2 meters. So even if you don't have a general, you can help out with that. But the Hurricane Watch Net is transmitted on the 14325 20 meters and 7.268 40 meters. And hey, ham radio guy, Case, he's got a let's see, a couple of years. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I am. Thank you. So let me read you some about Bobby. And you guys who watch my channel a lot know that I suffer from some eyesight issues, so I hope I don't tell you that he's a brain surgeon or something. But Bobby amassed a total of 20 years of service in electronics troubleshooting and repair, including patient care and EMT services, so medical devices. And in 1992, he created and managed a biomedical electronic service department for a local company, and 2 years later, they went nationwide. So he's got a lot of background in electronics. And then he was a primary consultant for 2 major medical manufacturers. Then cancer disrupted his life, and he went through a lot to deal with that. In fact, he ended up in a wheelchair for a while, and ultimately he ended up, he was able to get back out of the wheelchair, but ultimately he ended up having to take an early retirement. But also in 1986, he learned of a program called Skywarn, which most of us are familiar with these days. If you're not, usually there's 1 or 2 of your local repeaters who will, let's see, one video showing not too.
Hey, Doug, I think it's just showing me on the YouTube here.
Oh, it's not showing me?
It's not picking up whoever's speaking.
Okay, well, let's go back. We'll go back to gallery mode.
I know they don't want to look at me on.
So Skywarn, where your local repeaters can be used to, the bearded gentleman with headphones. Local repeaters can be used to broadcast information about the local, usually severe storms and tornadoes, but also they have what's called spotters, and you can take a little class in that. It's usually done, you can do it online or at your local ham club, and you become a spotter, and you can radio into the net control who's doing the Skywarn net, and you can help out that way. Now, we're going to take that a step further and go more nationwide with the discussion here in a minute. But so anyway, Bobby got involved with Skywarn in the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Jackson, Mississippi, and for that matter, Bobby lives in Mississippi. Sorry, guys, I'm laughing. Oh, Ian's back with us. Hey, Ian. Wayne said he has a face for radio. Whiskey Mike, he has a face for radio. But anyway, so I want to get on down here to so we can get into the questioning, and we're going to ask you guys if you have any questions. Post them in the chat, and Wendell's going to keep up with that. And after I ask Bobby some questions, then we're going to turn it over and let him answer you guys' questions. But back to Bobby's background. He was forced into retirement. He found areas within the hobby of amateur radio in which he could be of help to others. And he started working closely with the Maritime Mobile Service Net. You guys probably heard that one. That was the one on 14.300, right, Bobby?
That's correct.
And I like to tune into that sometime myself, even though I'm not in a boat. Anyway, and then Bobby, listen to this. This is cool. Bobby ran phone patches for missionaries, continued to work with the Mobile Service Net, Marine Mobile Service Net, doctors in Haiti, Honduras, Guyana, Nicaragua over the years, helping out with communications. Some of you, if you're new, you may not realize this, but in years past, amateur radio was really, really crucial to allow missionaries to phone home. And the ham operators would use something called a phone patch, and they would actually be able to use the phone patch to talk to their family back in the States. And I suppose that's some of what you did, right, Bobby?
Yeah. In fact, there's one of my phone patches right there.
There it is. Yep, there you go. Back in the days when not everyone was carrying a cell phone, or nobody was. So, and then Bobby moved on to the Hurricane Watch Net, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And as I think you designed the logo, didn't you?
No, actually, my Elmer, the late Colonel Don K0IND, he designed that. Oh goodness, in I want to say the late 70s, going into maybe the early 80s. His background, he was a pilot in the Air Force, and
okay.
And since he was loved all kind of insignias, he actually designed it. And over the years, I've actually after I came on board, actually cleaned it up a little bit, gave it a little bit of a 3D look to it, and where it had been just pretty much black and white. He told me what colors he wanted, so I added that to it, and it's sort of morphed from there, but to what we have today.
Okay, well, cool. So I want to throw this out here. This is something from Bobby. He said, "I do know we all face trials and tribulations, as you know. He's gone through cancer and confinement to a wheelchair. And as strange as it may sound, I still find peace and happiness. Jesus said in John 16:33, New Living Translation, which is a real good way to read the Bible, it's very clear. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. So put your faith in Christ, and you can't go wrong with that. Now we're going to transition into some question-answer period. I'm going to ask Bobby some questions and get him to expand on some of this in more detail, and then we'll take you guys' questions. So, Bobby, you're the net manager for the Hurricane Watch Net. Tell us about what motivated you to join the HWN. Although I've got a little bit of that in your bio.
Yeah, you already covered part of that. What happened was shortly after I got into ham radio, which was summer of 1988. I got my first started off like we did back then, had a novice license, quickly upgraded to technician. But since I was on the road quite a bit working on medical equipment, I had a Kenwood TS440 I would put in the passenger seat of my car. And if I wasn't working 10-meter mobile, I would turn it over on 20 meters just to get an idea of what I was getting in for when I upgraded to general class. So this particular day, I was taking care of some clinics in the Little Rock area of Arkansas. And at the same time, I got turned around on HF and come across this net that's on 14325. And they were working a storm called Hurricane Gilbert, that big monster storm that hit the island of Jamaica. And then, of course, the gentleman I happened here was one I just told you about who designed our logo. Colonel Don K, K0IND, he passed away back in 2017, but he was the net control at the time, and I was listening to him. I thought, well, he's operating that net. That is cool, and what they were doing just really struck my interest. Later on that day, not to sound like Gilligan's Island, but the weather started getting rough, so I started tuning around on 2 meters and maybe see if I couldn't find somebody I could talk to, and lo and behold, there's this Skywarn net taking place. I'm thinking, what in the world? I had to listen to it, and I thought, man, I didn't know they had this in ham radio. Nobody taught me this when I was going through the books I was reading to get my novice or technician, or even the club I was going to. Nobody even talked about Skywarn. So that really struck my interest, and when I got back to back home and to the Jackson, Mississippi, or when I was living at the time, a few days later, I went to the weather service office there in town and introduced myself to them and asked them if they knew anything about this program called Skywarn. They said, we know all about it. We've been trying to get it going here for a few years and just haven't been able to go anywhere with it. I said, what do you need? What can I do to help out? He said, that's the question I've been waiting for. And so I started working with a few folks, a few of the forecasters there at the office, and there was a couple other guys that already had a station set up. It just really wasn't going anywhere. So anyway, with the help of them and a few other guys, we got together. Within a few months, we actually officially cranked up and started up Central Mississippi Skywarn. Well, fast forward, you asking the question how to get into the Hurricane Watch Net. Well, after I had to take medical retirement, for the longest, I was just sitting around. I don't want to say I was moping, but when you have something serious that just, changes your life forever, it just you go through a little bit of a depression, and you start trying to figure out what can I do. And I'm just not one to sit around doing nothing. I've got to do something. And I just started praying about it, and it's all of a sudden like the Lord hit me and said, Bobby, you got a HF station, you got a tower and a beam. There's people on HF that could use your help. And so I first found the Maritime Mobile Service Net on 14300, quickly joined them, and next thing you know, I'm running phone patches for missionaries and mariners wherever they may be at, but then a few of the guys who were part of the Maritime Mobile Service Net were also members of the Hurricane Watch Net. And I also got to realizing one of the guys who were checking in with us was Don K, K0IND, and I got to thinking, what do I need to get on the Hurricane Watch Net? So they directed me where I needed to go, and I quickly joined them March of 2000. And at the time, they were trying to get their website up and going. Really wasn't getting far with it. And then the net manager discovered I had a little bit of a background doing the website, so asked if I would take over. I said, sure. So I've been running the website for them ever since. So just to get on with the Hurricane Net, one was just amazing. Then a couple of years later, opportunity came around for me to become assistant manager. and I was assistant manager from '02 to '06. And I stepped away for a little bit due to my health. It was wasn't doing good. Had a few other life changes take place, and I just needed to sort of get away from things a little bit and focus on my health. And once things got back better, or at least I say better, at least where I could stabilize and cope with things, I thought, let me try hurricane watching that again. I really miss that. And I got back on in 2012, and uh, the following year, things opened up where needed a new net manager. I was asked to fill the role, and been in that role ever since. And it's just a pleasure and honor to be able to do what I do in that role.
Well, thank you so much for what you do. And Jerry, I see your comment over there, and that's so true. Just like what Bobby just said, the Sky Warren is a great way to give back to the community, and Bobby ended up doing both. So, Bobby, tell us a little bit about the history of the Hurricane Watch Net, when it started, who started it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. You our founder is Jerry Murphy, KAYUW. He's a, see if I can pull this up here at the same time. He's still with us. He's in his late 80s. He founded this thing back in Labor Day weekend of 1965. He was in the Navy as with a construction battalion, or as they called them back then, Navy Seabees. He was stationed at the time in Rhode Island, and on Labor Day weekend, he was operating on the Intercontinental Amateur Radio Traffic Net. Today they operate on in the mornings on 14300, but back then they operated on 14320, and they used to do a lot of traffic handling. When I'm saying traffic, I mean phone patch, actual written traffic, and doing a lot of stuff for the our military, because that was back during the Vietnam conflict, and but there was a lot of questions and a lot of people asking about the storm named Hurricane Betsy. So Jerry asked the net manager if he could move all that traffic from 14320 to 14325. He would do his best to handle that. Manager thought, man, that'd be a great idea. Not knowing what's going to take place of all that, but he's up in Rhode Island. There's a lady down in the Panama area near the Panama Canal. She followed him up, and they started doing their best to get information to all those asking about Betsy, because this thing is trying to come through the Bahamas. The storm actually made a couple of track changes along the way. But as it's trying to come back going through the Bahamas, everybody's concerned about it. To help get more information, they found a gentleman in the Miami area. He was able to get the latest forecast or public advisory, and they started getting that on the air. Jerry had the idea, maybe the forecasters could, get observed weather data. There's a lot of mariners out there, and some of them had weather stations on board. If not, you can still give a pretty good estimate of what's going on, and especially with the sea state and all that type of stuff. And so he asked the guy in Miami if they could ask the forecasters if they could use data. He said, please, whatever you got, send it to us. So they began that exchange, two-way exchange of information. And throughout that event, was able to track the storm through the Bahamas, across the southern tip of Florida. And of course, that storm eventually landed into southeastern Louisiana. And that was the first time a storm had ever created over $1 billion of damages, and that earned the storm the nickname $1 Billion Betsy. And since then, Hurricane Net was born, and we've been at it ever since.
Well, that track is incredible. That thing just couldn't figure out where it wanted to go.
That's one thing I'll tell people when it comes to Mother Nature, and even with hurricanes, quit following that dotted line or even this actual track that the forecasters are seeing, because this is not the only storm I've seen over the years that I've got history on. These things can change direction, so you just never know.
Now, you guys work directly with the National Hurricane Center in Miami, right?
That's correct. We work directly with them. I've been doing that ever since 1965. Had a formal and direct working relationship with them. I made my first trip to the National Hurricane Conference, which they have that every year. And in 2014 was my first trip. And that's the first time I discovered that there's a Canadian Hurricane Center located in Dartmouth, Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Oh.
And I didn't leave that conference until I met the gentleman who was sort of the liaison, if you will, with the Canadian Hurricane Center. And we quickly formed a good relationship, and then decided to work together. because it's rare, but there are times that storms do hit the Canadian Maritimes. And I didn't know it, but as it turned out, a few months later, we were working. Well, first started off as Tropical Storm Arthur that hit the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and a few days later hit Halifax, Nova Scotia as a Cat 1 hurricane. So,
oh wow!
And since then, I don't know. The Canadian Hurricane Center may not have wanted me to be, because it seemed like since the 2014 season they've been getting a lot of storms up in their area. So, but yeah, we work with both of them, and through some of the services, especially now that we're since 2000, we have our for lack of a better word, it's an internet chat room, but it's a private one, and we actually link up with the forecasters at the Hurricane Center and in Miami. And of course, anytime there's a storm hitting Canadian Eastern Canada, we'll have some of their forecasters may join us from time as well.
And you guys, you also work with Saturn Net too, right?
That's correct. We've been working with Saturn ever since they came along back in 1988. They first, one of their first activations was for Hurricane Gilbert that hit Jamaica that year, and they always operated on 20 meters on 14.265, handling outgoing health and welfare traffic. They never handle anything going inbound. It's always outbound. There's a lot of legalities you have to worry about with the inbound part, but they always handle the outbound health and welfare. And anytime we had requests for outbound on our net, we'd always have to send them to their frequency. And I always thought, it'd be great if we could work together on the same frequency, because one of the things I always taught years ago, the last thing you want to do is move traffic. If you can handle it on frequency, that's the best way to handle it, especially emergency traffic.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, as it turned out, around 2021, some events took place that worked out fantastic, I think, for all of us. And since that time, we've been working together. Anytime we activate, they're right along there with us. Gives us an extra set of relays, if you will, to help us hear stations that we may not be hearing. And then at the same time, if there is any outgoing health and welfare, they're right there to take it and handle it. If they're not, they've helped get us trained to know what they need to have, what we need to do to help them and get them the data, and they handle it from there.
Now, for the benefit of folks who may be new to amateur radio or even new to Weather Talk, what is the Saturn Net?
Saturn stands for Salvation Army Team Emergency Radio Network. That's what that acronym stands for. It's sort of neat. We have two planets with names for them. We got Saturn and Mars. Of course, Mars is military affiliated radio service, but Saturn is Salvation Army Team Emergency Radio Network.
Now, speaking of them, you received a nice letter what was on the behalf of the military regarding some joint operations with Saturn and Mars, right?
Something like that. Now, what happened was back in 2016, we had a storm development called Hurricane Matthew. At the time, it was the first Category 5 to develop in the Caribbean since Felix did back in 2007. And at this time, on this particular screenshot there, Matthew was a Cat 5 stalled almost at the Venezuelan-Colombian border. And it was forecast to go straight towards Haiti. And possibly as a Cat 5, definitely it was being forecast as a Cat 4. But before the storm actually made that northerly turn, I received a phone call from the head of U.S. Army Mars. He introduced himself to me, and he said, Bobby, this is a directive that's been handed down to me from the Department of Defense. I got to thinking, DOD, okay, that's the Pentagon. Yes, sir, what can I do for you? He said, look, we've been watching, like probably you are too, watching Hurricane Matthew. And we're trying to prepare for humanitarian aid for Haiti once the storm has passed and is safe to get in there. What we're needing is any information you can give us about the storm, what it's doing, damages, how are the ports of entry, things of that nature. I'm thinking, well, I'll be happy to do what you need, but y'all the military, y'all got stuff we can't think of. He said, that's to a point, but you got something we don't have. You have eyes on the ground. I said, I see what you mean. So we started feeding them information left and right, and every now and then they said, how are you able to get this? I said, sir, you guys just get the information. That's all we're doing. And we started pouring it in left and right. And The following day after the storm left Haiti, and actually was coming off the east coast of Cuba, the head of U.S. Army Mars phoned me back up, and he said, look, this is, again, from not only myself, but also from the Department of Defense. We just want to say thank you to you and your team. Leaving the ports in Virginia right now are 3 Navy ships leaving with water, the means to make water, medicine, medical supplies, boots on the ground. And you can see from these images here, the damage in Haiti was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. Over 550 people died. There's a lot are missing. Plus, there was also cholera going through the whole country of Haiti after the big earthquake that happened back in 2010. But at any rate, he told me that there's 3 Navy ships going. He said they're not little ones either, Bobby. He said one of them's the aircraft carrier, USS George Washington. The other one's the USS Mesa Verde. And the other one's another flat top. You may have heard of it before. It's a helicopter carrier, the USS Iwo Jima. And if you're thinking back to the 60s, that's the same helicopter. It's the same ship that picked up a lot of our Gemini and Apollo astronauts back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few months later, we received this real nice certificate from U.S. Army Mars, thanking the Hurricane WatchNet for our efforts and things we did during Hurricane Matthew.
Wow, that's so cool. That is so cool. So before I move on to the next question, I wanted to ask you, what type of information do you guys relay to the National Hurricane Center? And I know you guys also broadcast bulletins from them, I believe. I guess that's what you'd call that, because I hear them when I'm tuned into you guys.
That's correct. We retransmit the public advisory. Used to, we would read the entire thing, but over the past few years, those public advisories have just gotten to be where they're a mile long. If you took a pause, but every few sections, like they've broken down into, I actually timed it myself, just trying to read it at a normal reading pace. It'd take over 15 minutes to read one of those advisories. Then by the time you think, okay, let's do it in English, now let's do the same thing in Spanish. It's taken over 30 minutes just to get the advisories out. So we found a way to just shorten it up, just cut out a lot of the bulk. Just get, most people want to know, where's the storm at? What's the wind speed of it? What's the wind gust? Where's it going? And where's it located at now? And that's what we get. If there are people want more information, like what's the latest watch areas, what's some of the big towns and things that nature, we'll ask, does anybody need additional? And we'll be more than happy to give that information out. But the information we're getting from for the Hurricane Center that they want to know about is information such as, in addition to the person's name and their location, they want to know what their wind speed is, wind gust. If they are using a personal weather station, what type are you using, and some other information will gather that. If anybody doesn't, you don't have to have a personal weather station just to give us weather data. We'll always take estimated. It's just measured is a lot better. We'll just face it. But there's other ways to get estimated weather, and I'll touch on that momentarily. But in addition to the wind speed, wind direction, wind gust, we also like to get barometric pressure. If you have a barometer, is it steady, falling, or also when was the last time the barometer was calibrated? Rainfall, how much over X amount of time? If you're able to safely do so, tell us what kind of damage reports you're getting. If you're close to the shore where you can see what the surge level's doing, let us know what that type is going. Any other things that sort of helps paint a picture for the forecasters of what these storms are doing. Sometimes you can look at data, but what's this thing really doing? Well, it's blowing trees down everywhere. We've had people say, well, hey, the roof's actually come off my house. There was one year, I'm just grabbing memories here. 2004, when Hurricane Ivan hit Grand Cayman Island, we had reports that people were actually sitting on the roofs of their house and actually strung up the 20-meter dipole, just laid on the roof, using a car battery to run the radio. And they're telling us about the storm surge around their house. They're just trying to stay alive, and they still give us weather reports.
Yeah.
I've got all kinds of stories on that part. But at any rate, that information paints a picture. How bad is this thing going? So anything we can get like that is very helpful.
Now, I have a lacrosse unit over here. It's not a high dollar unit or anything like that, but it's got the wind gauge and barometric pressure, temperature, amount of rain. But I've heard your net control operators ask, if yours is calibrated, things like that, and I know mine's not. But if someone has one or even doesn't have one, can they still report like just what they see?
Exactly. Yeah, we'd love to hear what's going on. One way you can, if you really don't know how to judge wind speed, like watching the trees like they're trying to blow, or the limbs are moving around, this type and other, go to our website, hwn.org. And on the left side navigation bar, about midway down, you'll find a link that's called Beaufort Wind Scale. And that Beaufort Wind Scale is very, very neat. And it's just not only for hurricanes. For your local Skywarn nets, if you don't have a personal weather station, you may not be at home. You may be traveling somewhere. You can use that same information for your for thunderstorm net activations, tornado net activations. Very easy to use that scale, and you can be pretty doggone accurate. It's hard to tell. You're not going to be able to tell what barometric pressure is. I've never known anybody to judge that part, but you can at least get a good idea of what the wind speed and your wind gusts are doing, and then pretty much where the direction of the wind's coming from.
Yeah. So guesstimates are okay, and it sounds like that scale may be the sort of thing where it says compared to this would be this speed. Okay.
Exactly.
Like little bit of movement of leaves was probably this amount, and
exactly
tree bending over is not good. But
if you start seeing a branch of a tree starting to break it off, so like it's about bigger around your arm, well, it's got to be at least that.
Yeah.
If the tree starts falling over, well, it's at least 70 miles an hour.
Okay, so. Yeah, 70. Okay, so how many members do you currently have to help out with the net?
Right now, we have about 54 members. And they're scattered about 20 U.S. states and 6 countries. For the United States, of course, that's United States and Puerto Rico. And we also have members who are located in Canada, Bermuda, Honduras, Venezuela, and Aruba. And I'm leaving somebody else somewhere. But also, we have 7 of our members who are fully bilingual. You don't have to be bilingual to apply for the Hurricane Watch Net.
Yeah, I was thinking about it a while ago when you mentioned Spanish.
Yeah, but we do have a few of our members who are fully bilingual in Spanish, and that's to help those that are in the countries where Spanish may be their native language, or they may speak English, but they're just more comfortable speaking Spanish. So we do our best to try to help them out as well.
Oh, excellent. Now, you have 2 different levels of membership, right? You got the net control operators, but most everybody starts as a relay scribe, right?
Everybody starts as a relay scribe, of course. Really, everybody still, once they become a member, they're a net control operator. The other would be a probationary member. But the difference between the net control and the relay scribe, well, the net control, it's just that he's in control. We are directing it. You have to have a director, right? But to help out, especially on 20 meters, we need to have a relay. And the more we have, the better. 40 meters, even really on any frequency, you need to have some relays. And there's obvious reasons. You may need to take a break. You may need to get some more water, maybe take a nature break. So you have that relay to help you out there. But especially on 20 meters, you got to consider when your signal leaves your antenna, unless you just have some super short propagation, unless somebody's at least 500 miles away from you, they're not going to hear you. Now, say, for instance, I don't know, you and Wendell, y'all live close together. Y'all may be able to hear one another on 20, I'm not sure. But say another friend of yours, they may be 50 miles away, they're not going to hear you, you're not going to hear them. So by having another relay, whether you're actually able to hear them on the air or not, we can at least communicate with our relays in our chat room and coordinate that away. But at least it gives more people on there to help others that may be tuning in and listening. They may not hear the net control, but with the relay having a chance to work a little bit, really realize, the frequency is in use. Propagation can sometimes shift when you least know it. There may be times where we need all the help with relays that we can get. I know Wendell can appreciate this one because we went through this with Hurricane Ernesto that hit Bermuda a few weeks back. we had a situation on 20, and it happens every now and then. But we had to have what I call three-way propagation. The net control may be being heard into the affected area. The net control cannot hear the affected area. You may have we'll say for Wendell's near the Atlanta area. He's not hearing the affected area. We had a net control. He's down in DeLand, Florida. He's hearing the affected area with no problem. They can't hear him. So, what it did, it took the net control and the relay to get the information. Wendell would send out the ask what information do you have? The relay and the land got it and forwarded it to Wendell. Then Wendell asked the next question, what do you have? And then is there anything else we can do for you? And if need to, still complete the service. I always like to say that a member says, I don't hear the affected area, therefore I cannot be effective.
Yeah,
there's always a way that you can be effective. You may not hear it, but by having team members of the relays, that can help out.
Propagation is weird that way.
Exactly. And I always like to use the term team, meaning as an acronym, together everyone achieves much. And because you just can't run on that by yourself. You got to have a team to help you out.
Yeah, my friend Joel lives 2 miles from me, and we sometimes get on 2 meters on a simplex frequency, and we coordinate chasing DX or mostly summits on the air QRP stations. And sometimes I'll hear him before he does, or he'll hear him before I do, and we're only 2 miles apart. Just the way the skip zone shifts around a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So, do you need more members?
Oh yes. There's sometimes that we'd have to shut down applications because I end up having all of the our Elmers. Every applicant that gets accepted gets assigned to an Elmer or training officer, and I don't like to have the Elmers with more than 2 people. Some can handle 3, but I want to try to keep it I don't want to say modest, under control, I guess you say. I don't want to overload or overburden anyone. And but there's times we've actually run out of room, and I don't have not able to bring anybody on because I don't have anybody to train. But we've right now our applications are back open.
And I have your website up right now, so they can see up there where it says net information, and at the very bottom of that it says net control information, and that's where they go to sign up, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, last week, in fact, I heard my brother in there. He's a relay scribe, and I heard him in there doing a lot of relay scribe work, and his antennas have been blown down by inclement, easy for me to say, weather. And he found out that he had a 1.5 SWR, 1.5 to 1 SWR on his ZS6 BKW, which is wrapped around a limb and hanging down. But he got in there anyway, and remarkably, people in Canada were saying they could hear him. Mm-hmm. So I say that to say this: you can do it with just wire dipoles. I mean, Wendell operating with the same kind of antenna, and he's done really well. So if you're out there and you're interested in doing this, and you think, well, I don't have a Yagi and I don't have a beam or a tower, trust me, the good old dipole will still work for you. I've been running wire antennas for 42 years now, and it really will. It will do the trick. And you may have a lobe in a direction that they need, because you can hear somebody where maybe the net control operator has a null toward that direction. Mm-hmm. And like Bobby was explaining earlier, a team effort can help deal with those kind of things. But I understand it. Recently, Wendell was on there for like 3 hours and had nobody to relieve him, and just had to let the net shut down. Mm-hmm. And that's sad. And I think about how sad that is when you consider that we've got knuckleheads on some frequencies that have really nice stations, and all they want to do is get on the radio and argue, and they could really help out. Mm-hmm. Jerry, we see the question, and we're going to answer your questions in order as soon as I finish up here. I got a few more things I want to ask. I've had people come up to me. In fact, my brother and I had this happen when we were out hiking summits on the air trail. People still do ham radio. They'd see our radios on our backpacks, our HTs. People still do ham radio. And I've explained to them, ham radio is the original social media. and but is still. And I'll explain to him how it's still very active and supportive. The NOAA Weather Radio people and National Hurricane Center, and people ask, well, we have cell phones and the internet now, and so why do we need ham radios? Does it seem that people have no idea that amateur radio operators are still very much operating in the background of weather events?
That's a good question. Part of it is, how can I say this? I think a lot is just our own fault. What I used to do when I ran the Skywarnet when I was in the Jackson, Mississippi area, I always did my best to try to promote it. Anytime we had a training session to train weather spotters, I always try to get out the local media to come see what we do. I know a lot of people are, when it comes field day, they try to put out messages to the local media to do things of that nature. But there's a lot of other ways we can get out to the community using the news media to help us out and to let people know ham radio is here. I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do with it, especially in emergency situations. There's a lot of things with it that I would like to see even more promoted with ham radio, and that's for emergency services. And I appreciate you having us on tonight for this. Case in point, now, a few weeks ago, I saw this on social media. I'm not going to say where I got it, who posted it. I'm hoping it's a joke. But they're saying that during emergencies, 95% of the time, especially during a major hurricane, Cat 3 or stronger, the power and telephone lines, internet continue to operate. Thus, normal communications continue. Let me ask you this. When you have a storm that comes through and it levels everything like this is the damage. I'm not going to say which storms they are. I know which they are, but it really doesn't matter. This is the damage that was caused by a Category 3 hurricane along with storm surge, leveling everything in sight. Here's the Cat 4, leveling everything in sight. A Cat 5. Every single one of them, especially when you get to a strong Cat 2, you're going to have power lines down. Power lines usually carry telephone lines, right? Power lines usually carry cable TV lines. Some of them, like in my area, happen to carry fiber optic lines. Most places, they happen to bury the power lines and the internet and phone lines underground. But still, when you start losing power, you're going to lose the internet as well. Some places, they may have power lines and stuff, or certain utilities going under the roads, maybe a bridge. When those things collapse, guess what? You can cut those off. Oh, Bobby, but you got to remember, we do have cell phone towers that we still have cell services, right? This was just one of the many cell towers that got taken out with Hurricane Ian just a couple of years ago. This is a cell tower was taken down after Hurricane Michael, the last Category 5 hurricane we had hit Mexico Beach back in 2017, I believe it was. Don't get me wrong on the year, but this is a cell tower that was well west of Mexico Beach. This is on the west side of Panama City, Florida. And that was the site all across the region cell towers been over. So there, I say, after a major hurricane event, you're going to have 90% of your power and your internet services and things of that nature on? I don't think so.
What year was the one that hit Panama City?
I want to actually, it was 2018. It was 2018. Okay, yeah. That was for Hurricane Michael.
That was the one I was going to bring up. And my brother, Whiskey Mike, there, he said, like I told you, he went through 5, and Charlie in 2005, they were without power for 8 days, and the cell tower batteries ran out. But I learned something interesting, too, about cell towers. Even if their battery backup is working, and some of them will even have a generator, and you could possibly go 7 days with that. But what people don't realize, and my brother and I were at a Hamfest, and there was a guy there speaking who, he was military reserve, but he had had been involved in California in some, I think it was an earthquake, but phone lines were all down. He's out there with an HT, and people are saying, "Who are you talking to, and how are you talking to them?" And what he was teaching us was that a lot of times the cell tower, and I've actually confirmed this with a friend of mine who works for AT&T, the cell tower is not down. It's just not now this is assuming the battery is still working. It's just not accepting calls from people who aren't pre-certified or pre-authorized. And so first responders, even they have to apply for it, but first responders can be authorized so that they can use the cell tower when all of ours, your IMEI, your ID on your phone, if you're not one of them, it rejects your calls anyway. So he was actually telling people at the Hamfest, find out who the ham operator in your neighborhood is. He's your best friend, if you don't happen to have a license for yourself. And the one in Panama City, I was tuned to 14325, and I think that's the first time I really found the Hurricane WatchNet, and it was by accident. And there was a guy in Panama City, the only ham operator that had anything going, the only power, and he was using his HT, that he had charged his batteries up enough. And he was radioing through a repeater 35 miles away, providing, and then there was a guy picking him up on the repeater and retransmitting over HF. And they were coordinating relief efforts for like water and food and things like that, medicines. And I thought, man, look, here we are. It was 2018. Here we are with all these advancements, and a guy with his HT is the man of the hour right now, because he can hit a repeater 35 miles away and relay that type of information. So, it's very much still amateur radio is very much still used and needed.
And I remember for myself back in 2005, after Hurricane Katrina hit me. At the time, I lived in Pearl, Mississippi, which is a town just east of the capital city of Jackson. And I was actually about a mile due west of the Jackson International Airport. But I went through, in the Jackson area, I went through Camille back in '69, which came right through the city of Jackson as a Cat 1. And then Katrina, when it came through, actually went east of me. And I'm here to tell you, Katrina made Camille back in '69 look like a thunderstorm. I mean, I saw places that was messed up over 150 miles inland. I never thought it would be that messed up. And like where I lived at, I was without power for 3 weeks. And it was strange as a lot of my neighbors, they never liked that my tower. I had a 40-foot tower behind my house with a 6-element tri-band beam on it. And I was always being told, you messing up my antenna, or messing up my TV, this, that, and the other. I wasn't ever messing them up. But come to find out, it was the cable TV had a break in the line.
Yep.
And it was other commercial stuff coming through, messing them up.
I've been accused of that.
Right after Katrina, since all the telephone lines were down, some of my neighbors started asking, what can you actually do on that ham radio? I said, well, I'm already in touch with some of my family. Where's your family live at? I'll get you in touch with them. I said, you can do that? I said, yeah. Well, where's some of your family at? I found some guys on the HF, and we started running phone patches for them. I became the hero of the neighborhood.
And Jerry, you're right. That's a good comment. Jerry Simonowitz over there in the chat. POTA is a great practice for people that can get out and learn to use. I call them makeshift antennas. With soda, I just throw a rope over a limb and pull up an end-fed halfway that I carry wound around a little winder that I got. I got mine from NY4G. He makes a really great NY4GEFHW.com. He makes a great little portable end-fed half wave, and he's perfected his transformers to where he can squeeze another 1/4 of a watt through that transformer. So if you got a 5-watt rig, you're getting the maximum power out there, and it's remarkable how far we can talk with 5 watts. And Greg's saying that last week during Hurricane Debbie, they were hit with a flash flood and got 4 feet of water in their home, and it hit so fast they only had about 10 minutes to get their aging parents and cats upstairs. So there's somebody having to ride out a storm. Fortunately, he had an upstairs. That's good, Greg. He grabbed a couple of his HTs and he had no power or cell phone. See, cell phone, it was either out or not accepting his calls. And but he hit the Florida SARnet, and the EOC sent the Army National Guard in an airboat to rescue them from their. Wow, that's a great story right there, Greg. And so, all right, let me get through a couple more of these, and then we want to go ahead and answer the questions over there in the chat. So any of you guys who have a question, go ahead and load it in the chat, and Wendell's going to gather them up. So if somebody's not a member of the Hurricane WatchNet, could they still help out? I guess that would be somebody that would radio in what we call it, reportable criteria, like if they're in the zone where the hurricane is likely to hit.
Yeah, you don't have to be a member just to report weather. We'd love to hear from you. Becoming a member means that you want to become a net control operator for the hurricane net. For just reporting weather, you don't have to be a member.
And you guys need more people doing that, don't you?
And we need more people to help us with weather reports. Some people may think, well, my report is not that significant. Folks, let me tell you something. Every single report is significant to the forecasters. I've talked to them many times. Every time chance I get to go to the National Hurricane Conference, I always meet up with some of the forecasters. They say, look, every piece of information you get is important. How important is it? I'll pull up just one case. Hurricane George back in 1998. At the time the storm was going towards Cuba, they were first thinking the storm was actually going to go towards Guantanamo Bay and then on the south side of Cuba. One of the forecasters asked if there was a way that you could find any ham on the eastern side, easternmost part of Cuba, to get some weather information. Julio Rapol, WD4R, who heads up the ham radio station at the National Hurricane Center, which is WX4NHC. Back at that time, they had the call sign of W4EHW. He speaks Spanish. At the time, we didn't have any Spanish-speaking members. So anyway, he starts trying to make contact and get anybody on the eastern part of Cuba. And lo and behold, he found a gentleman in Punta Este, Cuba. And the guy at the time, he was actually standing on the chair in his living room because the water's all over the floor. And he's giving weather information. And the forecaster said, look, I'm glad he's got all that weather information. I just need to know which direction the wind is coming from. And so he asked me, what's the wind direction? The guy comes back and said, del sur. I mean, from the south. And all of a sudden, that's what I needed. And the forecaster runs out of the room. Later on, Julio got with him, said, well, I was so excited about that, just that one report. He said, it meant the storm is going to the north side of Cuba. And it just changed the entire forecast of that storm.
Oh, wow.
Just that one report. It's just coming out of the south.
Well, my brother I heard a guy last week. I was mobile, and I was tuned in, and there was a net control. Somebody radioed in and said that he had 7-mile-per-hour winds, and I said to myself, he's wasting the net's time giving a 7-mile-per-hour report. But then my brother straightened me out because he said about an hour later, I think he had handled the relay on that. And about an hour later, I believe he said the guy came back with a 20-mile-per-hour report. So you could, and he was apparently in the path. So you could tell then that an hour later, it went from 7 to 20 mile per hour. So even that, I thought that was a silly report, and I thought, man, you're wasting their time. But apparently everything is needed. And so I was going to ask you too, what is the greatest need of the net? But I think you need more net controls and relay scribes, and you also still need more participation from people that are in the affected area.
Yeah, all of the above. Take one more deal. You're talking about the reporting stations. There again, you may think, well, what I've got in that isn't that important. Yeah, it may be at the a particular time, it may not seem important, but afterwards it helps paint it paints a picture for that forecaster what that storm is doing, helps them realize where they're going about trying to forecast that storm, where it's going, how bad it's going to be if they're doing the right thing. Say, for instance, I'll just grab a space out of hand, off the top of my head, arbitrary. Say, like they're thinking that the storm's going to hit between, say, like Miami, Florida, and Jupiter, Florida, and of course the middle part would be the strongest. But all of a sudden, Miami's not getting that strong of winds, but yet further north is. Well, logic would dictate the storm is actually shifting, moving more toward the north. And they need to figure out, well, what did they mess up on so the next time they get it right? So all that information, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the landfall or maybe helping them get a better idea of where the landfall is going to be, helps that forecaster learn, okay, I messed up here. Now what can I do to do it better next time?
Yeah. Oh, and Jamie said Hurricane Michael, October 2018, He was 135 miles from the Gulf in southwest Georgia, and they were without cell phone and power for over a week.
I don't doubt it.
So I guess it's a good reason for us to always keep our HT batteries charged. So what would you say is the greatest challenge for the Hurricane Watch Net these days? And we may have already touched on it.
Especially right now. One, if you don't have enough people to help out on the air, that's one challenge. The second challenge is not having enough reporting stations. But I would have to say the greatest challenge for all of us, especially for ham operators, is going to be our sun. We do have the solar cycle where we have a solar minimum, where you don't have hardly any sunspots at all, which means like on the 20-meter band, propagation isn't that good. All right, we're going to the peak of the solar cycle where you start getting a lot of sunspots. Well, if you have a solar flare takes place, well, it's going to knock you off the air. But then when the band recovers, man, you got some good skid now. All of a sudden, band condition's good. The problem is, using this example here, this happened to us back in 2017, bottom of the solar cycle, right? We were trying to work Hurricane Irma. And the day is hitting Puerto Rico. I mean, just plastering it. I mean, you got to figure just a few days earlier, it leveled the island of Barbuda as a Category 5 hurricane. And after the storm passed, the survivors on that storm, they were evacuated. And that was the first time that entire island of Barbuda had been uninhabited in over 300 years. And that same storm's going towards Puerto Rico. Well, we're trying to get people, help people out and getting reports in. All of a sudden, the entire HF band goes dead. Come to find out, the sun unleashed a Class X 9.3.
Mm-hmm.
Here lately, the sun's been unleashing some X1s. I think the other day it was a X 4.5, I think it was. But this was the aftermath of a 9.3. We could not hear anybody for 4 solid hours on 20 meters. It was a little bit longer on 40.
Well,
and then it was a few days later, as the storm's trying to come around and hit Naples, Florida, it popped off another solar flare. This time it was a X 8.3, and the band was dead for about 2 hours. But everything you see in red is the total HF blackout. If you're in that red zone, you're not going to hear anything. You're not going to be heard.
Yeah.
And case in point, you can have like a beam that's got about 8 dB of gain to it, running full legal power, ERP of 9 kW. Guy across the street's not going to hear you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I have a playlist on my YouTube channel called Radio Wave Propagation, and I was introduced to a device back in December. One of the Patreon members who supports my channel sent it to me, Ham Clock, and it's been. And I had. It's funny thing was I had all last year. I kept thinking I want to do a video about propagation, and the Ham Clock gave me the perfect tool to not just talk about it but to show it. So it turned into a whole series, and you can see, live all the solar data that it's got a pane called space weather, and you can see the solar flux index, the X-ray value, and of course we like it to be in the A's. B's is okay. C's tolerable. We don't want to see M or X. And here we are. Yet we've had the sunspot cycle in its peak, and well, like you say, not only do you get good propagation, but you get these flares. And so you get the good with the bad, but when it is good, it's great, and you could work the world at 100 watts then. Mm-hmm. And like you say, you could have 9 kilowatts ERP with a beam, and if that flare is an X, you're
then
not.
You also have to deal with a few days later if it's Earth directed, then you get a geomagnetic storm from it. So.
And I've said this to my viewers many times, and even some that I advise through my Patreon team members that can ask for consultation. I always tell people, man, if you can only put up one antenna, make it 40 meters, because I call it the 23-hour band. I've stayed up all night a couple of times to prove it out. In the southeast here where I am, it stays that even during cycle 24 when everything was abysmal, 40 meters came through for us. And it'll be up until, in my area, 4:30ish, and it'll be down for about an hour, and then it pops right back. So to me, it's the go-to band if you just have any doubts whatsoever about any other band. And again, if you're just going to be able to, I used to run a 40-meter ham stick on my truck. Now I had a fleet of ham sticks. Now I'm using the ATAS 120A from Yaesu, but because it truly tunes itself. But I had the ham stick, and I said, well, which one am I going to leave on there all the time? 40 meters. And you guys operate on 7.268 day and night, I understand, because, I mean, at night it's going to go long. You'll be able to cover even more. So one
There's
more.
a reason why we went to 40 meters as well. Up until when I actually became net manager in 2013. Thank goodness that year we didn't have any landfalling hurricanes that year. We did activate for one storm in the Gulf of Mexico, but we were only on the air for about 2 hours, and it was downgraded to a tropical storm. Later on moved into Veracruz, Mexico. But prior to that, we were just strictly considered a 20-meter only net. There were just 3 other occasions where we did work outside the 20-meter band. That was during Wilma in 2005. We worked on, I think, also, in addition to 20, we worked 40 and 80 meters during Irene in 2011. And then 2012, we worked 20 and 40 meters for Isaac and Superstorm Sandy. But still, we weren't considered a 24-hour net. And back when I was assistant manager in the early 2000s, I kept begging our manager then, we need to turn this thing into a 24-hour net, working at least 40 meters. And he said, well, why? I said, well, think about it. Hurricanes are like babies. They don't care what time of day or night it is. When they get ready, they're going to come on shore or be born. They're going to do it, and we need to be there. And anyway, it sort of bounced back and forth. But I said, when I became manager, I said, we may have some growing pains, but we got to be a 24-hour net, because not that I was trying to be trying to look into the future, but I was also planning for the future, because I could see that was going to be a quiet solar minimum, because the previous solar maximum wasn't that good. 20 had been iffy at the best. And I said, we've got to prepare to do something. And by us going to 40, I believe helped save our organization, because, I mean, even with the recent storms this year, 20's been great. It's been lasting a lot longer than what it had been. But still, we're getting more information coming on 40 meters. So, but yeah, we got to have people on both to help out, and around the clock as well.
Well, I noticed last week, simultaneously, you had an NCO and some relay scribes on 20 and also on 40 simultaneously. And it dawned on me, I said, well, because the 20 meter is going to be flying over some people's heads here in the southeast, where the 40 meter wouldn't. And in the daytime, you got nice regional coverage on 40. Of course, at night, it's going to go long. But by having both of those bands active during the day, you were covering ranges that otherwise you might not be able to, people might not hear you or you hear them. That's great. Well, I got one other question for you. We've already put it up there, the net control information up there right below the logo. I've got that up on the screen, is where they go to sign up. But what if somebody's worried about the time commitment in doing this? What would be expected?
Anything you can give us is great. I always try to let people know we're not your average ham radio net. For one, we are a seasonal net. We're not operating all the time, but at the same time, I like to consider us like that of a volunteer fire department. You see, we never know when we need to activate, but when we do, we need to be there. It may be a one alarm fire that, kind of like this last storm was, where we just on the air for a day. It may be another Hurricane Matthew or Hurricane Dorian, where we're on the air for 24 hours a day for a whole week. And sometimes it may be a storm where it may not be that it made landfall as a category 5 and not be a major hurricane. But I'll do one, say like, go back to 1998 again, when we had a storm called Hurricane Mitch. At one time, it was a Category 5 hurricane, but it weakened down to a Cat 1 and, before it hit, let's say, Honduras. But over the next few days, as the storm moved inland, it dropped 75 inches of rain on the country of Honduras alone. Okay, Honduras is a mountainous country. That thing caused massive flash floods, mudslides, you name it. That one storm alone killed over 10,000 people. I'll say that number again. 10,000 people. For the longest, about that same number was still considered missing. And that's not including the thousands that died in Nicaragua and Guatemala. For the next 3 or 4 weeks, we were still on the air helping out with the aftermath of Hurricane Mitch, mainly helping with aircraft that were trying to come into La Ceiba, other aircraft that were trying to take off from there, and a couple other airports delivering. They were bush pilots trying to fly in medicine, foods, and to other areas that were hard hit. And some of the pilots were saying, "Please stay with me. It looks like I only have my plane tore apart before I can get landed. And then please stay with me after I do get everything done. I'm not sure people are going to want to tear my plane up or try to take over my plane and trying to ride with me out of here." And we did that for a long time. And to help out, we had a number of our members who were former military and who flew aircraft and could speak their lingo, and that definitely helped out. There were a lot of folks that were still tied up in some rivers, and they were trying to get the latest of what was going on, so they knew how to get out when they needed to and stay safe and what have you. So you never know with these storms. So we need all the help we can get. If you can give us a few hours, that'd be great. I know people can't stay all day long, but if you have the time, we'd love to have you.
Or even 1 hour, right? To give some, even if you can get 1 hour, to give somebody a nature break, right?
Exactly.
And Ian, thanks. I'm glad you're still with us, and I appreciate your help earlier today. And I'm about to turn over to Wendell, and we'll cover those questions. I want to just say one more thing before I turn it over to Wendell. My brother and I have. He went through 5 hurricanes in Florida, but when we were kids, I was 17. He was, he would have been 13, I think. We went through Hurricane David in September 1979, I believe it was. It hit Savannah, and we lived about 35 miles inland. The eye went over our house. It was pretty incredible. And just to show how important ham radio was back then, all the radio stations in Savannah, one by one, had to go off the air. The last one broadcasting was AM station, and the engineer was broadcasting weather data from the transmitter at the base, the base of the tower, the transmitter room, and the water got up to knee deep, and they decided for safety they better go off the air. So that left one little 3,000 watt FM station that was inland a bit near to us. That was the only source of any information for anyone, no power or nothing out. But my daddy always had a radio with batteries in it. So we were tuned in, and they were getting their weather data directly from ham operators up and down the southeast coast of Georgia. And one of the guys who was radioing in information, his tower got blown down. This was 3 years before I was licensed, but even then I was a CB guy, and I was thinking, boy, it'd be cool to have ham radio. And like I said earlier, you got people out there that do nonsense on the air when they could be actually doing something that's needed. And especially it really pains me when I hear the ones that have such great stations and they could be doing that. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendell. And Wendell, take it and let's field some questions.
Jerry has a question for Bobby. What kind of station do you need to participate? He says HF, of course. What other requirements as far as a station do you need?
A station that you can actually hear with helps. I mean, yeah, it'd be great if everyone had a tower and a beam. But the biggest thing is where you're located at with the antenna setups that you have, are you able to hear the Caribbean? Are you able to hear the areas that we work the most for landfall and hurricanes? Be able to hear and work those areas with no problem. I mean, yeah, sure, there's going to be days where even with the station I got, I may not be able to hear the affected area due to the way propagation is. But on average, to be able to do that, I would say, yeah, that's all you need. You don't have to have a particular brand radio. You don't have to have a particular type of antenna. I mean, I've seen some folks use a 43-foot vertical and tune it up on 20 meters or 40 meters and just running 100 watts or just a simple dipole, maybe up 30 feet up in the air. But yeah, the bigger the antenna, there's more gain to it. Power's not really everything. It does help, but just always remember, power's not going to help you to hear any better. So yeah, the better antenna you have to be able to hear, it definitely helps.
Yeah, I mean, I was even hearing very well the other day with my mobile. And I see one down there I want to go ahead and address right quick. Levi, he said he'd love to help. His shack is in his car. He's got a ATAS antenna and a 710. He wants to know if that's acceptable.
I don't think that we're too good. I mean, not. I don't want to sound like I'm putting down on anything, but if you ever, all I can say is compare what you've got there, being mobile as compared to like that of a base setup, and I think you'll find a world of difference.
Well, and the reason I say that is because I have an 891 FT891 and an ATAS, and
Mhm.
I've worked South Africa with it. But it's all dependent on band conditions. So I would say that maybe Levi could certainly help out with
Mhm.
radioing in some reportable criteria. He could probably
Right.
get to the base station that would be acting as a net control or a relay. All right, go ahead, Wendell.
Yeah, Jerry says, just a comment, he has a 43-foot vertical, but he has a 1200-watt amp. So that would certainly be sufficient to work the
Mhm.
net. Next question is from Ian. And again, Ian, thank you for helping us out with our test today. Another question for Bobby. Just wondering if CW is ever used.
On our net, no. We're strictly a HF voice net. I've been asked, would we try and do some HF digital stuff? It's been asked in the past. The only problem is, don't really have many people with our organization is quite interested in doing that. Um, uh, it's something we need to look into, maybe do that in the future. From time to time, I will also try to address this too while I'm thinking about it. I've also been asked, do we ever do digital stuff like using VHF and what have you? Don't want to duplicate another organization, which is the VOIP Hurricane Net, which is headed up a very good friend of mine, Rob Macedo, KD1CY. They're on Echolink, and I think the room that they're in is called WX. Uh, what is that? Anyway, they're at the bottom on that list of all the stations. Is toward the bottom. It's WX Net or something like that. At any rate, they with their net, they're able to tie into a lot of the Echolink connected stations, also using DMR, D-Star, DRADS, Yaesu System Fusion, things of that nature. And they do a super fine job there with that. But for us, we'll always be a HF voice only net.
Okay, yeah, and I was reading that myself, Wendell, and I thought, well, Ian's uniquely positioned because, especially 20-meter band, he'd have good coverage in our direction probably during the daytime. And I guess one argument, of course, I love CW, but one argument I would have for maybe CW is because you can pull people out of the fray even if they're running if they're in an area that's going to be affected, and all they've got is a QRP rig, or they're having to operate off battery and maintain a lower wattage power output. I know this is anecdotal, but one of my engineer friends in radio says that it takes about 45 watts sideband to equal 5 watts of CW. So I could see that if somebody was in an affected area, it might be helpful for them to be able to use low power and get to somebody, because I think Ian could still be connected through the internet, right? Through you guys, you have your chat group, right? If he was an NCO.
Yeah, that's why we do our coordinating. In fact, we've even been discussing too. What are we going to do in case there is an internet outage? How are we going to do some control like that? So
Yeah,
that's some things we're going to be discussing in our off season and make plans for all.
Well, that was a good point there, Ian. I'm glad you brought that up. And Jerry, I see you got to go, so thank you very much. Wendell, do we have any others?
No, we don't have any other questions currently.
Okay, so if anybody else has a question, post it right quick while I say this. If you joined in late and you want to see this from the beginning, I think once we go down and give it a little bit, and the YouTube will then put this out permanently. Of course, you won't be able to chat anymore, but you'll be able to read the chats, and you can go back and listen to the whole thing. I want to thank Bobby and Wendell for helping us out here. This has been very enlightening to me, and I hope the rest of you. And Bobby, I hope you get a lot of participation. I hope you get some people that will contact you and reach out about joining and helping out. And you heard what Bobby said. You don't have to have a certified weather meter. You can guess at things. Like he mentioned that, what was that site again where they can learn how to guesstimate?
Yeah, just go to our website at hwn.org. And on the left side navigation bar, about halfway down, you'll find a link that's called Beaufort Wind Scale. And that Beaufort wind scale, just read it. You may
yeah,
want
see
to
it
print
right
it.
there. Now
And
that
this gives you a lot of good information on how to judge wind speed.
I wonder if that's actually related to Beaufort, South Carolina, which is a town on the coast.
That I don't know.
Doug,
Uh,
can I add one more thing
yeah,
before we
sure.
wrap up here? On our homepage, Hurricane WatchNet, if you go to the right hand side, we are active on social media. We have a Facebook page. We have a page on X. We're on Instagram now. And we do have a YouTube page that you're going to start seeing a lot more video posts on YouTube. So we're really looking to increase our social media presence because that's so important these days is to have your presence out there. So
Okay.
again, there's a three links on the right hand side of the page. All they have to do is click those.
Yep, I see them here. They're cut off a little bit, but I see them over there on the right. All right.
Also,
Well,
too, talking about our web crash in the program with the group. Also, free service of our organization, something I created back in 2000, is a weather email service where you can sign up to receive via email during the hurricane season is to get the tropical weather outlook. And if anytime there's an active storm, you'll get the public advisory every time it's issued by the National Hurricane Center. We get all that data. It comes directly from the Hurricane Center. Anytime we get within almost milliseconds, you'll have it in your inbox for your email. It just depends on how fast your email service is. But we have that for the Atlantic. If you have friends that speak Spanish, we have a Spanish version of that. Also for the Eastern Pacific and Central Pacific. So you get all the weather information via email, and we have a couple links for that. One on the dead center of the screen, and also on any page on the left side navigation bar, about halfway down, you'll find called I think it's a weather email or something like that.
oh, excellent, excellent. That's good to know. Well, hey, thanks a lot. I don't see any other questions there, so we'll go ahead and close out. And I do want to thank you so much, Bobby and Wendell, for joining us here in honor of National Preparedness Month. Thanks for all you guys who posted comments and questions over there in the chat. Really appreciate your participation as well. And please, I saw that Jerry mentioned earlier when he retires, he's interested. And that's a good point. I guess, some people, don't, like you said, you never know when a hurricane's going to hit. So some people who would love to participate may be at work and can't. So even more so, it's good if you have people who consider doing this as a retirement gig, something to do in retirement and give back. Or if you happen to work a job where you've got some flexible hours and you can break away and give just 1 hour. I mean, I think that would be great too. So just wanted to maybe comment that please, if you will, go over there to the net control information on the left side of the page that you see up there, and consider joining and just contribute whatever you can. But also, don't forget, if you are in an area that is in the eye of the storm or even going to be affected even from the outer bands, I'm sure they would appreciate it if you would radio in your wind speed and estimates and things like that. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. We'll say 73 to everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks much.